I'm Robert W. Morgan. This week, the special of the week presents rock and roll's leading lady, Pat Benatar. Tough talk, raw rock, and some very provocative photos added up to an image that got out of hand. She wasn't aware of the effect it would have, but she knew she wasn't very comfortable with being a sex symbol. She didn't want Mom and Dad to think rock and roll had turned their daughter into some kind of weirdo. Meet Pat Benatar, this week on the Robert W. Morgan Special of the Week, brought to you by Michelob.
I'm about to indulge in my second favorite pastime, pouring a smooth, mellow Michelob. And now I'm going to enjoy my first favorite pastime, drinking a smooth, mellow Michelob. Care to join me? Put a little weekend in you. Yeah. Anheuser-Busch, St. Louis, Missouri.
And now Michelob hopes you enjoy the Special of the Week. Several years ago, Time magazine looked at the album debuts of several promising young female rock singers. Among them, a brown-eyed brunette whose voice sounded like it came from a body much bigger than her 5 feet and 90 pounds. This woman had a distinctive style and could belt them out with the best of the boys. Rock and roll was ready for Patty Andrzejewski. I'm Robert W. Morgan. This week, the Special of the Week tempers toughness with the tenderness of a siren sweetly singing. She sings about crimes of passion committed in the heat of the night. She whispers promises in the dark. She's rock and roll's latest heartbreaker. She's Pat Benatar.
I'd always wanted to sing rock and roll. I just was never able to sing it. My voice naturally sounded like my mother's. It was very operatic sounding. That was what I figured I would sing if I ever sang, because I couldn't sing to any of my Beatle records or Stones records. It just never sounded right. So I figured I would be singing opera or in, Broadway kind of a thing. When I was in New York, I just started to go to record companies, and there was really no place for someone like, what I was doing was kind of like what Barbra Streisand did, 10 years ago. And there was no place for that kind of thing.
Andy and Mildred Andrzejewski's daughter, Patricia, always loved to sing. She took after her mother, who sang in operas before Patty was born. Patty grew up in the suburbs in Lindenhurst on New York's Long Island.
I think I was really very good, just that I had a very big mouth. I had a lot to say, even when I was very little. I was pretty much of a tomboy until I was about 16. Not 16, probably about when I was about 12, I changed, because then I found out that you could do other things with boys besides play football and baseball. There was always kissing. I think I changed right then. I think I had extra hormones in those days or something.
Patty took voice lessons, but the discipline demanded of a future diva diverted her from doing the things that made high school fun.
When you're studying, it's real restrictive. There's a lot of things that you can't do in order to keep your voice in, perfect shape. No smoking cigarettes, no anything, just to keep it perfect. I had to stop cheerleading in 10th grade. I wasn't allowed to be a cheerleader because the gruffness of screaming out cheers would have affected it, so I never got to do that. And when you're 16, that's a real important thing to you. I think I went up to the final cut. That's what they used to call it, the final cut. And then they asked me to please stop doing it and not go any further. So I never ever got to wear the little pom-poms.
Instead of going to college, Patty married her high school sweetheart and became Mrs. Dennis Benatar. And when he was drafted, she followed him to basic training in South Carolina. Culture shock set in when the East Coast girl confronted the Southern belles.
They were wearing little white gloves and carrying handbags when I got there, and I had way too much makeup and miniskirts. It didn't go over very great. And I was in a very conservative job. I was going to school there, and I was a bank teller, so it was odd. I'm not the kind of person who can stay in an office building, that kind of thing. So I was in this little cubicle for about a year and a half, and I just started to say that there had to be something more to, I knew I could do something. I knew I had a natural talent. I didn't know if I would ever be any good at it, but I figured it was worth a shot.
Pat Benatar's career began in Virginia when she sang for her supper at a place where music was on the menu.
A singing waitress job in Hopewell, Virginia. It was an amazing thing. It was in a restaurant called the Roaring Twenties, and it had that kind of a motif to it. And the premise was that you wore like a flapper outfit, I think they call it, and you would serve dinner and you would waitress, and then at a certain time of the show, you were scheduled to go on stage and you had to stop whatever you were doing and go up and perform. So a lot of times you would go up with food on your outfit and people grabbing and screaming, I want my coffee, you know, and you have to go, I have to go. The customers would come in knowing that this was the situation. But even though they knew that, I mean, you know how people are when they want service and things, and you would be running up with crab legs hanging on your fishnet hose.
Pat Benatar comes home to catch a rising star. Next on the special of the week, I'm Robert W. Morgan.
You know what I'm gonna do right now? I'm gonna put my feet up, relax, and have myself a beer. Excuse me, not just a beer, a Michelob. Oh, look at that. Those golden bubbles climbing up to that frosty white crown. What a picture. Almost ashamed to make it go away. Almost. Oh, yeah. I don't know how you get much better than this. You know, they used to say this beer was so special you should save it for weekends, important occasions. Well, it's pretty special, all right. But for my money, Michelob is too good not to enjoy whenever you get the chance. And I got the chance, so I'm gonna have another one. Do you care to join me? Put a little weekend in your week. Yeah. Anheuser-Busch, St. Louis, Missouri.
I'm Robert W. Morgan on the special of the week with Pat Benatar, who studied opera and tried cabaret and supper clubs while searching for a style. And when she found one, it was only rock and roll.
I wanted to always do it and stuff. I know I always wanted to be Mick Jagger or Robert Plant or something. I never wanted to be a girl singer. I always wanted to emulate what the guys are doing because they seemed to be more suited to what I wanted to do. But rock and roll to me is a real sensual and maniacal form of music, and I just can't get off on singing ballads for half a show. I mean, I would rather sing, you know, fire and brimstone kind of things and, you know, craziness. The freedom of being a maniac on stage is real important to me.
After the Army, the Benatars headed home to New York and eventually headed separate ways. Dennis lined up a job in television production, and Pat lined up outside a New York club called Catch a Rising Star. Monday night was New Talent Night.
All the people that were nicely waiting in line for 5 hours rushed to the front, and there I was standing there. So I got just about next to last. I think I was like number 27 or something like that. So I got to go on at the amazing hour of 2:45 in the morning or something. But on Monday nights, the place stays really packed until that time. And the only thing I remember about it is being hysterically afraid. I was really scared because I'd never sung in New York. I had no idea what this was going to be about. And what you did was you went up there with, before I never rehearsed with you. I mean, you just went up cold. So I was really, you know, scared. And I'd been singing with a band for a year and a half, and now I was singing with like a piano player. So I basically went up there, you know, hysterical. When it was over, I remember I just wouldn't look. I just closed my eyes real tight. But then when I finally did open my eyes, everyone was standing up and screaming.
The manager of Catch a Rising Star caught Pat Benatar the night she auditioned and lined up other appearances. Within 3 years, he had her working on her first smash album, In the Heat of the Night. Patty's tough talk and steamy sensuality impressed her new record label and pressured her into a role she was reluctant to play.
I don't think that marketing departments, when you're new, exactly know what you're all about. And I don't think you very much know what you're all about either. So you're bombarded with photographers who want to take pictures and outfits and clothes and things. And you walk around and you mostly spend the first year of your career wearing the wrong thing, posing for the wrong pictures. But you don't really know any better. And I'm not using that as an excuse because it's not an excuse. What happened was that I thought that this was an all right thing to do until I actually saw it come out. And then I realized that this wasn't what I meant, but that if I turned my face away or wore my eye makeup a certain way, that this other look emerged. And what happened was this other look became more important to these people than what I did musically. And that's what it was about it that I disliked so much. Because I wasn't ashamed to be sensual on stage, because that's what I think rock and roll is about. This isn't hymns for us kind of situation. I mean, you know, it's a sexual form of music. It definitely goes for your gut feeling. It's not trying to be terribly cerebral. And I think that when you're singing about love and making love and talking about sexuality, which is fine. I never held a whip in my life, okay? Never. Fantasy is fine. When they try to make it reality, that's when the hair on my neck starts to bristle. It's a fantasy for me, too. I mean, I don't live this 24 hours a day. I do it for about 5 months out of the year, and I do it for 90 minutes a night, and then I put it away, and it goes away. And it's a great thing that I get to get all my frustrations out, and I get to strut around on stage and be this beautiful woman that everybody just goes, ah, and then I just put it away and I go back to being this.
A child of the 60s stands up for children of the 80s. Next on the Special of the Week with Pat Benatar. I'm Robert W. Morgan. I'm Robert W. Morgan on the Special of the Week with Pat Benatar, the artist and the businesswoman.
The paradox of the artist is that, you're the artist and the business person, and one doesn't necessarily care one iota about the other's ideas. So a lot of times your artistic sense is telling you that you love this record, but you're afraid because you really don't know if it's commercial enough or saleable, you know. I mostly really care about pleasing myself. Hopefully America likes it too, you know, that kind of thing. But you have to be true to yourself. I mean, I can't make records that I don't like for the sake of selling. Because you have to live with it. You have to sing it night after night after night. And you better like it if you're singing it for like 8 months straight.
Pat Benatar's values were shaped by the 60s. She makes music with a message. Hell is for Children is a song about child abuse.
It seems that 1 out of like every 5 households in America has children that have been sexually abused or physically abused, you know, beating-wise and things like that, or just mentally abused. I mean, it's a terrible thing to see a little baby, you know, a 2-year-old or 3-year-old with burn marks or black eyes and broken ribs and from a parent. It's sickening. I mean, there's nothing that I can say that could explain what it feels like to see that or to be with a child and talk to them. The thing that is so amazing is that they really love their parents. They love them. They blacken your eyes and then apologize, and the parents will beat them silly. All they have to do is say they're sorry and they didn't mean it. Some people are in this business and in music, obviously, for just personal gains. I mean, everybody's in there for something personal. I mean, you know, you're not doing this for your health. I think every performer has an obligation, whether it's love songs, whether it's protest nuclear reactor songs, I don't know. Rock and roll is a timely kind of music. I mean, it's like the newspaper, only in musical form. I don't know if I would go that far, but I think it's definitely an obligation to see the world as it is and write about it, you know, whether it's, like I said, whether it's in love songs, you know, man-woman things, or world situation.
Are you a lover or a lovee? Find out next on the Special of the Week with Pat Benatar. I'm Robert W. Morgan.
You ever notice all the beers these days talking about their fancy ingredients? Special barley from here, exotic hops from there. Funny thing is, they've been making Michelob like that for years. They just don't talk about it. Don't have to. Oh, you can read the label if you're really interested. Says right here every ingredient used is the finest obtainable. Makes sense. Otherwise, how could Michelob be so good? I suspect the people who brew Michelob figure beer drinkers know a good thing when they taste it. And I appreciate that, because I don't want to spend my weekends, or weeknights for that matter, poring over long lists of ingredients. Ha! When I can spend that time pouring another Michelob. Anheuser-Busch, St. Louis, Missouri.
I'm Robert W. Morgan on the Special of the Week with Pat Benatar. Pat Benatar's sound comes from her band, not just her voice. It's shaped by lead guitarist Neil Giraldo, along with Scott Sheets on rhythm, Roger Capps on bass, and drummer Myron Grombacher. Together, they've moved from playing bowling alleys on Long Island to concerts in London. Benatar's newfound stature as rock and roll's leading lady now gives her the room to move musically.
The next single that they would love me to do, I'm sure, is Hit Me With Your Best Heartbreaker. You know what I mean? It's totally ridiculous. I just, you know, you can't keep doing that. I mean, if I felt that I could, I would, but I really don't, you know? You just have to throw everything out and start over again, at the risk of maybe not doing well. I never had the experience of being in a relationship where I was the lover. You know, I've always been the lovey, you know, where I was being loved and I was always walking out and that kind of thing. And this is the first time in my life that I have been the lover, you know, that I'm so gone over this person. And it's not always nice. I mean, sometimes you get hurt and sometimes you don't. And the odd thing about it is that this is really so funny. Most of the songs that I've sung previously were always from an observation point of view, because I never really had anyone that had done me wrong really badly or anything like that. It was all these poor men and women that had really been dumped on by people and always saying, oh, I don't want to take this lying down. I would see this all the time and I would say, that would be terrible. If that ever happened to me, I don't know. I would be so angry and blood in the streets, that kind of thing. And oddly enough, when it happened, I reacted totally differently. I'm not angry at all. It's pain. I mean, it's painful. It's not like before when I was the one who was walking out and you're so cocky and sure of yourself and you can just, you know, walk right out. It's different, and I want to sing about it, you know, because I can really relate to it, you know. I mean, sad songs sound great to me now. I don't know. I'm still not the person who just goes, oh, I can't live without, you know, I can't do that. I can definitely say now that I can live without you, but I really hate it. I hate living without you. It's not that angry thing like, you know, I don't need you, because I do. What I'm trying to portray is a modern woman who has no trouble with her own sexuality, no trouble being strong and being, you know, able to stand on her own 2 feet, but also knowing that softness isn't a bad thing either, you know, and being tender is a great thing.
Excuse me, miss, may I see some ID? That's next on the special of the week with Pat Benatar. I'm Robert W. Morgan. I'm Robert W. Morgan on the special of the week with Pat Benatar, who spends months at a time on the rock and roll road. Wherever she plays, she runs into her fans, who hunt through every hotel in town hoping to discover her whereabouts.
It's really harmless, and, you know, I try to think of it as like when I was a kid and, you know, if the Rolling Stones or the Beatles had been in my hometown, and I would have done anything to find out where they were staying, you know. So it's like really okay. You know, it's only a nuisance when they don't let you sleep and they keep calling on the phones or, you know, at really odd times so that they know that you're in there, you know.
Patty's pouty face is familiar to her fans, and if album covers were accepted as legal ID, she could leave home without her American Express card.
Sometimes I have to go to, you know, like a store like Sears or something, and I have to write a check, and I don't have a California driver's license yet. And one thing that happened to me a couple of months ago was that I was shopping, and I was writing a check, and there was an older lady behind the counter, and she said, "What's your ID?" So, you know, I said, okay, good. You know, I'm happy that she didn't recognize me or anything, because I could be left alone for the rest of the afternoon. And there's a young girl behind the counter with her who is besides herself. I mean, she's jumping up and down. She's biting her fingers and, you know, making this noise. And the lady is standing there, I'm sorry, you need a picture ID. And the girl's going, ah, you know.
When Time magazine picked out the promising young female rockers several years ago, it focused on Ellen Shipley, Ellen Foley, Carolyn Maas, and Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders. Pat Benatar appeared to be added almost as an afterthought. But from time to precious time, Pat Benatar's music has withstood the test.
I used to say, oh, if this ended tomorrow, I would be fine. I said this last year. There's no way now. Forget it. I'm hooked. I'm gone. It's too late. There's no way that I could ever stop. I think to myself, don't you know, you want a family, you know, that kind of thing. I don't think that I could even stop then. I thought that I possibly could. I doubt it. I doubt it. I don't think I could ever just totally stop completely.
The Special of the Week on Pat Benatar was produced by Rick Liebert and written by Steve Crowley. Our director, Stu Jacobs. Engineering by Ron Shapiro and Mike Williams, with production assistance from Frank Bennett, Paul Liebeskind, and Renee Jean Hill. The Special of the Week is produced and distributed by Watermark Incorporated. Executive producer, Tom Rounds. Next week on the Special of the Week, a band that specializes in ballads, Air Supply. The Special of the Week is brought to you by Michelob. Put a little weekend in your week. I'm Robert W. Morgan. Thanks for listening.